Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome into another episode of Home Field Advantage. My name is Will Highland. Hope you're all having a great week or weekend, wherever and however you may be listening to this podcast across our great country or our great land. And of course, if you're watching live on YouTube, we appreciate having you there. Please be sure to drop below and subscribe to our channel. That way, you can keep up to date with all the other future streams. But until then, we have a loaded show ahead of time. I'm getting used to a new technology setup, so apologies in advance if I'm a little bit all over the place with my setup here. Uh, it's going pretty well so far, but we will see as it progresses on. Um, I think there's really a multitude of ways we can go with the show today, in terms of where we start and where we finish. There's really three topics I want to talk about. The first being the World Baseball Classic. World Baseball Classic has got a ton of attention recently, obviously because it's going on, but also because there's been some controversy about its place in the sports calendar and its relevance to the game of baseball as a whole. So I do want to start there. However, I also want to talk about March Madness. March Madness being, of course, the other key component of the sports calendar going on right now. Between March Madness, the World Baseball Classic, the NHL and NBA seasons being in full swing, and of course the NFL offseason being what it is this week with the beginning of free agency, there's been so much to talk about. But I'm going to skip the NFL for now. And the last topic I want to talk about today is the Celtics. The Boston Celtics, at one point, I was asked by Kyle Diesel on a previous program if I thought they were still the team to beat in the Eastern Conference, and I believe that they were. And I think my exact words were, they are until they're not. They're the team to beat until they're not. And at this moment in time, I no longer can call them the team to beat in the NBA, and specifically in the Eastern Conference. So I'll touch on that last. But where I want to begin is the World Baseball Classic. So you guys know me, can see on my wall behind me if you're watching on YouTube. I'm a baseball guy first. I always have been, probably always will be. As much as I talk about new sports that I've fallen into, like the Premier League, which I've become interested in, although I'm not going to get to that topic today because things aren't going too well for Tottenham Hotspur. Um, but I've also gotten interested in college football. I've gotten interested in uh, the NHL a lot over the past few seasons. But first and foremost, I've always been a baseball guy. It's a sport I grew up playing. It's a sport I grew up wanting to be involved with for the rest of my life. It's a sport that I believe has a unique uh, role in American culture. But beyond that, I think I'd be naive if I didn't also acknowledge that baseball isn't just an American phenomenon. It's obviously not on the level that soccer or association football, as it's called around the world, is. It's not on that global level, and I'm not going to pretend that it is. But at the same time, I can't ignore what I've seen over the last 6 days since the World Baseball Classic began, and specifically almost the last 10 days. I can't ignore that. The sport has a unique place, especially in the Western Hemisphere, but we've also seen Asia. It's gotten really popular in places like Korea, Taiwan, and of course, Japan. And so for the last week, while I do believe that baseball is still an inherent component of American culture, it's also a world game. And this tournament, absolutely, make no mistake about it, has a place in the sport calendar. Not just in baseball's calendar, but in the entire world across all sports. It is It is an event that, if you think about it on just the most basic level, combines the two things that I would say are number one motivators for a fan base of any sport. Number one is tribalism and nationalism. Those two things sort of go hand in hand with sports, although within the borders of a particular country, those rivalries are usually among states or cities rather than countries. And so that nationalism is probably, especially in a sport like college football, geared more toward a state. You know, think a rivalry between Oklahoma and Texas, for example, in college football, the Red River Shootout. That's a rivalry based among states, but the attitudes that fans have in a game like that is very similar to the attitudes that we've seen over the last week or so in the World Baseball Classic. Now, for those of you who might be like, "Well, what the heck is the World Baseball Classic?" I guess I should have led with that. It's a tournament that has never really gotten off the ground in terms of yearly predictability, which I think is its one flaw, right? Unlike the Olympics or the World Cup, it doesn't happen every 4 years. Sometimes it's every 3 years. It's been like 6 years in this case because of the pandemic. Like, it needs to get more consistent, but it's essentially the FIFA World Cup, but for baseball. And what differentiates it from, the Olympics in hockey or sometimes the Olympics in basketball is you typically get the best players from the particular country that want to compete, not just the best amateurs. And so for the World Baseball Classic, it has been able to capitalize on those two things. It's been able to capitalize on tribalism and nationalism. Those two are very interconnected, but in baseball, it's a specific atmosphere that I think has been captured in this tournament so far. Puerto Rico and the Dominican Republic played the other night, and you would have thought it was a life or death situation. Like, it was the most pageantry and excitement that I've seen at a baseball game in my entire life. It makes Game 7 of the World Series in 2016 in Cleveland look like a Little League game. And I mean that with all the respect in the world to Major League Baseball. If Major League Baseball is interested in growing the game, this is a amazing way to do it. This tournament needs to happen every 4 years, and it needs to get on a schedule and be predictable. I would prefer it happen in the same calendar year as the Summer Olympics. That would involve at this point is for them to wait 5 years before they do it again. Then they could do it in 2028 and then do it every 4 years. I'm not sure if the International Baseball Federation would like that because they also run the Olympic tournament. They have a little bit of an interest in this tournament, and they help run this tournament, but in many ways this is a pet project of Major League Baseball. So I would prefer that this tournament happen in a predictable and easy to remember format. Um, Now, that's the background. That's the background of what the tournament is and what it's been able to capture. But even more so than that, there's become a discussion about, well, does it have a place? I've already told you, I think it does. I think this is a sports event that has tremendous value, not just to Americans who enjoy the sport like I do, but clearly to folks around the world. It's very easy to look at the Olympics or the FIFA World Cup and say, "Oh, that's really cool. I'll get into that because that's not really a sport that happens here a lot, and it happens every 4 years, so I'll get into it." Very difficult to convince an American sports fan that their players that play for the Yankees or the Mets or the Cubs or the Dodgers are going to compete in a tournament and potentially get injured. And I'll get into that in a second. Very different calculus for an American sports fan. to to simply brush this off as a useless exhibition. But I would caution even the most fervent American baseball fan that if you truly love the sport and you want to see it succeed, then this is something that you should embrace with open arms. Because at the very least, the players that are participating are doing so by choice. They're doing so because they want to do it. They're doing so because they have passion involved in what is going on the field. And so there's been a this discussion about among American sports fans that they are simply dismissing it as a non-interesting, non-consequential tournament. And I couldn't disagree more. Look, I watched the game last night. There's a game on tonight. Probably by the time you listen, you'll know the results. Did the United States beat Cuba or not? But last night's game when they played Venezuela. Now keep in mind where they're playing this game. This is another thing that people are just failing to understand. America and the Caribbean are not separated by a lot of geography. And I'm not going to go into like seventh grade social studies on you, but this isn't like the Olympics where it's happening off in some far environment with a time change and you're playing Hungary in hockey or something, or the United States swimmers are going against Germany. I mean, it's not happening in a far off place against a country that's not close to you. Last night we played Venezuela. Tonight we're playing Cuba. Cuba's 90 miles away from Florida. The games are happening in Miami. Miami and South Florida just so happen to have a large contingent of Venezuelan Americans and Cuban Americans, as well as immigrants of both those countries, not just those folks who are from that descent. And so they're practically playing, the United States is practically playing a road game on its home soil. Folks in the Caribbean love this event. And they're not that far away from us. These games have been played in Miami and Phoenix, both in the southern US and southwestern US. The United States played Mexico and Phoenix. It's not like the United States is playing Japan at some neutral site in the Netherlands. This is happening on our own borders, on our own TV networks, with a lineup of players that we have seen grow up. Mookie Betts, Mike Trout, Paul Goldschmidt. All three of those guys are probably going to end up in Cooperstown, let alone Nolan Arenado or Kyle Schwarber or Adam Wainwright, who's throwing tonight for the U.S. This is an event that Americans should embrace because it's our national pastime. And look, if you're not a huge into baseball, that's okay. But if you're a baseball fan and you find this to be a waste of time, then I'm not sure what to tell you, because there are 162 games in the MLB regular season. Right, if not for this tournament, they would be playing meaningless spring training games, where, in all likelihood, a guy like Paul Goldschmidt might have a couple at bats in the first few innings for the Cardinals, and then he's going to get replaced by some double A guy who's, looking for his shot, and he's going to go, and Goldschmidt's going to go off to the beach afterward. Now, I don't know the guy personally. Maybe he'd stick around. But that's what happens during spring training. But when this event is going on, these games are on national television on a Saturday night in prime time. Now, was I a little bit upset that the United States was playing a lot of 10 p.m. starts last weekend? Hell yeah, and I talked about it. But this event has meaning. Don't let anybody tell you it's meaningless. As I said, it encompasses two things that sports fans love: tribalism, nationalism, patriotism, rivalry. So I guess that's four things. In addition, it brings together the best players in the world. It's not like some of these other international tournaments within sports that maybe you'll have some amateurs and some pros. No, every single guy essentially on the United States, actually every single guy on the United States team, and most of the guys on a lot of the teams that were able, with the exception of like maybe Israel, Italy, and the Czech Republic, Most of these guys play professionally in some way, shape, or form. It's the best on best. As a hockey fan, we talk about that a lot. We want a best on best tournament. Well, in baseball, we have it, and we've missed it. It's been 6 years, and so this tournament happening when it does is extremely valuable for the sport. These people care. More people. I'm pretty sure 61% of Puerto Ricans watched the game against the Dominican the other night. 61%. More people in Japan watched the game between Korea and Japan than Americans who watched the Super Bowl. These are extraordinary numbers, folks. It's not some tournament that nobody cares about. It's not happening in a bubble, right? It's happening in a place like Miami that is it's like a melting pot of cultures, and folks from the Caribbean countries are flocking this event. They care. There were a ton of American flags last night. This tournament has meaning. And you know what it does? A lot of people are talking about the Edwin Diaz injury and the Jose Altuve injury. These guys could very well have also gotten injured in spring training. Are the Astros and Mets thrilled about this? No. But these guys sign contracts. And if the Mets or the Astros were so concerned about it, they are, a Major League Baseball franchise that knows the schedule. They could have written these things into contracts, and they didn't, because they understand the inherent value of the event at the basic level. They might not love that their stars got hurt, but they let them participate. And this idea that it's just a meaningless exposition game is being peddled by some of the most idiotic voices in sports. It has been. I mean, KFC Barstool is a freaking clown. The fact that that guy has a platform to talk about sports is an embarrassment to that company, to be quite honest. And that company has become an embarrassment to the sports world for a few years now, in my humble opinion. Part of the reason why I wanted to start this podcast in this company that I made is because we need less people like Barstool and more people who actually want to talk about sports and not just bitch on Twitter. And he's a Mets fan, right? So he's automatically walking into it from a bias perspective. Saying that it's a useless tournament and that people don't care and that the Major League Baseball season is more important. Hey, maybe from a financial standpoint, you're right. But if you love the sport, you can't simply look at that last night, what we saw when Trey Turner hit that grand slam against Venezuela, and act like that was meaningless. You're a clown if you think so. He's a joke. He's a freaking joke. He's a bad dude also. I mean, I don't like to engage in personal attacks, especially people who obviously are quote unquote bigger than me and you know, you know, I've never met and whatever. But seriously, dude, like just get over yourself. You run a horrible sports show and nobody cares what you truly have to think. The other guy's Keith Olbermann, who's basically saying they should call off the tournament because Edwin Diaz got hurt. Look, Edwin Diaz got hurt jumping around during a walk-off celebration, essentially. He could have gotten hurt doing that during a game 2 of the Major League regular season. And do you think anybody would have thought differently about the World Baseball Classic? No. No. It's just an excuse, to be quite honest, and especially Keith Olbermann and folks like that. It's an excuse for people who don't like what the tournament represents, which, to be quite honest, is patriotism and nationalism, and the idea that countries should enjoy one another, or that you should have, or sorry, should enjoy the rivalry with one another, or that the United States should have any sort of patriotism. That's really what guys like Keith Olbermann are pissed about. Baseball represents an era of sports that's sort of, gone by the wayside recently. you know, the meritocracy, rivalry, passion, not just a bunch of corporate interests. I mean, that's what the World Baseball Classic is. It is like a college baseball environment with pros. Look, and I'm not a huge fan of the jumping around the bases and waving your hands in the air and the bat flips and all that. You guys know me, I've never been into that. But this tournament is the one place where I'm like, you know what? Go for it. These guys are the best in the world. They're not some college kid who, is going to end up working at Edward Jones in 4 years. You know, these guys are the best in their sport in the world. If they want to bat flip when they're playing their rivals and their teammates or whatever, and they want to celebrate with their countrymen, I'm all for that. So that's why people don't like the World Baseball Classic. They're hiding behind, oh, well, I don't want guys to get injured, or I don't think it has meaning. No, they know it has meaning and they don't like that other people are enjoying it and they want to drive you all down. Now, was it probably smart for baseball to have it during March Madness and NFL free agency? Maybe not, but people are still tuning in. I don't have the ratings from Fox last night, but I'd like to bet, other than March Madness, it was probably the top sporting event in ratings. I wouldn't doubt if at times it exceeded even the game that was going on CBS at the moment, which I'm pretty sure was Purdue and Arkansas. So that's my spiel on the World Baseball Classic. There's a lot of reasons why it's meaningful, and whether or not you agree with me, it's fine. It's fine if you disagree. If you think it's just an exposition, I understand that point of view to an extent. In terms of, it's not like these stats are being used in their, Hall of Fame numbers or whatever or their career stats. I know it's not apples to apples in terms of, the Major League Baseball postseason, but nobody ever complains about guys who get hurt in the All-Star game. No one ever complains about guys that get hurt in spring training. It's a 162 game season. There's a lot of chances for Edwin Diaz to tear up his knee. They're just using that as a mirage because they don't like what the World Baseball Classic stands for. Meritocracy, tribalism, patriotism, nationalism, belief in country over self. These are values that the sports world does not recognize anymore. They're things that Keith Olbermann loathes. They're things that KFC Barstool doesn't have a high enough IQ to understand. And that's why they don't like the event. I'm never gonna root for Lance Lynn or whomever who's pitching usually, except in the World Baseball Classic. I texted a buddy last night. He said, "I love Lance Lynn. Lance Lynn has never played for the Red Sox. In fact, he grew up a Yankee fan and pitched for the Yankees and the Cardinals, two teams that the Red Sox have sort of been rivals with. But last night, I was rooting for the guy, and I thought he was nails. Daniel Bard, dude fell off the earth. I felt bad for him last night. Adam Ottavino, pitched for the Yankees, pitched for the Red Sox for a hot second. I'm rooting for these guys. Trey Turner plays for the Phillies. I mean, Kyle Schwarber plays for the Phillies. Goldschmidt plays for the Cardinals. And these guys now don't play for the Red Sox. Usually wouldn't cheer for them. Mike Trout, you could argue that last night was the biggest game that Mike Trout has ever played in. And Mike Trout has been arguably the best baseball player of my lifetime. So this tournament has meaning. Don't let guys like Keith Olbermann or KFC on Twitter try and steer you otherwise. It's not exactly apples to apples with Major League Baseball, but guess what? It's not supposed to be. It has meaning. It has value. I think baseball fans know it. I think you guys know it. And I think we should, whether you are watching this tournament or not, or whether you agree with what I'm saying or not, it's fine. But just, I guess as a general thing, what I've always tried to do, and what I think probably a lot of you guys as my listeners do, is Watch the sports and then just enjoy them. Like someone's like, "Hey, why are you watching?" Because I like it. Because it's fun. Because it brings me joy. We've lost joy in our culture and in our society in many other aspects of life. Sports, it's still there. And no one should be able to take that away from us just because they're sour grapes on Twitter and, you know, no one gives a shit what they think anymore. Pardon my language. So that's my thoughts. Tonight, FS1, 7 p.m., United States and Cuba. Biggest showdown between these two countries since. Never mind. I'm not going to do that. All right. Moving on to the March Madness tournament, which I got to give respect to, has equal as much meaning in American culture. It is awesome. I mean, I like March Madness for what it is. I mean, I'm not a huge basketball guy, let alone a huge college basketball guy. But I think what that tournament brings is a lot like what the World Baseball Classic brings, right? Passion, pageantry, tribalism, meritocracy, rivalry. You don't get a second chance in March Madness. You don't get the opportunity to, oh, well, you know what, boys, everyone gets a trophy. We'll get them next time. No, it's a 64 team, do or die, win or go home tournament. It is inherently American. And I enjoy that. A team like Fairleigh Dickinson University, who, by the way, I had never even known. That's the thing about all these tournaments. Had no idea who St. Peter's was last year. No idea who Fairleigh Dickinson is this year. But you know what? It doesn't matter. They win. They win. They knock off top teams. Whether it was who was it last year? Say I already forgot. I just know that St. Peter's won. I don't know who they beat. Was it Ohio State? No, that was Oral Roberts 04. I forget who St. Peter's beat in the first round last year. Maybe it was Kentucky. I can't remember. But anyway, Purdue goes down. Number one seed Purdue went down last night to was it no Kansas went down to Arkansas. I think I'd said Purdue. Yeah, Kansas lost to Arkansas last night, and then Farley Dickinson had beat number one overall Purdue. So two of the one seats are already gone. You also had number four Virginia lose, and then you had Princeton beat Missouri last night. I'm losing track here. Princeton. Who else did they beat? Yeah, I'm so bad at this. Well, you run a sports podcast and you can't remember who Princeton beat. Everybody listening or watching right now is just yelling at me. Oh my God, will they beat? Let's see. Arizona, of course. Arizona. That was the team I think I had in the Elite Eight. Well, Princeton is just another one of those teams where if you beat a number two as a 15 and you go to play the seven, you're beating the seven. You know what I mean? Like it's not it's not like, oh, we got that one big upset and all our momentum's gone. No. No, if you start the string of upsets, it's very likely that they continue. And that's what I like about March Madness because it's the team with the most to lose. Sorry, with the most to lose that actually loses, right? A lot of times in basketball, especially in the NBA, if you're the best team, you're probably gonna win, right? Um, but not in March Madness. And so I've really enjoyed that part of it this year. Look, my bracket sucks. But you know what? No one cares about my bracket. And quite frankly, I don't care about yours because at this point, there's zero perfect ones left. And after the first couple rounds, no one's bracket that they filled out on Thursday morning means crap. It's all about the excitement. At this point, you had Tennessee beat Duke last night. Go Vols, Rocky Top. Some big blue blood programs going down. You got UConn still hanging around. Virginia just can't get out of their own way in these tournaments. I know they won in 2019, but they lose the other day too. And so you've had just uh, this going pattern of just excitement at every level, and I'm just waiting for Alabama to lose. To be quite honest, you know, that would be fun. Um, I think some of the games that we've seen, like Auburn having what was it, a 10-point lead over Houston, who was a number one seed who almost went down. We almost had three number ones go down in a total of 2 days, right? Because you had Kansas lose to Arkansas, and then uh, you had a situation where we already knew about Farley Dickinson upsetting um, Purdue, but then Auburn had a 10-point lead over Houston, which is the other one seed. But then Houston went on this amazing run, and they outscored them 51-23 in the second half. They did get in some foul trouble, but ironically, that foul trouble was pretty much the only time that Auburn scored any points because they only made 4 baskets in the entire second half. It was a complete collapse. It was a great game. You also had Penn State coming in really close with their game last night too. Um, there's so many games. I've watched so much basketball. I forget who Penn State played. Again, I played. I run a sports show, and I forget stuff. Yes, Texas, another 2 seed. Yes, we almost had another 2 go down as well. Um, Texas just barely held on. Excuse me, against Penn State. So this has been a good tournament so far. We'll see what happens today, tonight, over the rest of the weekend. Um, if you're listening during the week, you'll know what the Sweet 16 and Elite Eight matchups are. I usually like to bracket forecast. Like last year, it was kind of easy to bracket forecast and see that Duke and UNC were going to play with one another. Um, but this year, it's a little bit hard to do that at this point. Um, I'm pretty sure my Final Four was like Baylor, Kansas. I want to say Arizona was in there. Maybe Houston. I can't even remember what my Final Four was. That's how busted my bracket was. But like I said, you guys don't care about my bracket, so I'm not gonna waste my time and waste your time explaining it. Yeah, it's just been a good tournament. I guess I'm pulling for UConn. I'm pulling for Princeton. Pulling for some of these Northeast schools, right? A lot of Midwest out there. A lot of West out there. UCLA last night got a big win as well. But I'd say I'd pull for UConn, Tennessee, Princeton, and see where that goes. So I'm looking forward to um, following the end of that tournament. All right, speaking of the hardwood, closing out the show here, talking a couple minutes on the Celtics. All right, I think the Celtics could be in trouble. I led the show by saying that at one point I thought they were the team to beat in the East. I actually had a listener reach out and request that I talk about this, and I think it's valid, right? Because all year long there's been okay. The Celtics started out with this amazing record; they've been the team to beat for a while in the East. And when Diesel asked me a few weeks ago who I thought was still the most dangerous team in the East, I still said it was the Celtics, but I also said it's the Celtics until it's not. And right now, it's hard to say that the Celtics are the most dangerous team. If you look at what Milwaukee's done in the second half of this season, they're now 30 games over 500. Pretty sure there was a time where they were less than 10 games over 500 early on in the season, like around Christmas or New Year's. They've been so hot. Giannis is the best player in the NBA, and I still believe that. Right? No disrespect to um, Luka or anybody else or Jokic or anybody like that. No disrespect to even Jason Tatum or KD or Embiid or anybody else around the league who's having a good year, Steph. But at this point, maybe it's a little bit of my NBA ignorance, but it's Giannis's world and we're all living in it. And so right now the Bucks are the best team in the East and they're the most dangerous team in the East. They have that title experience. They won. The Celtics, I hate to break it to you guys. I mean, I'm a pseudo Celtics fan. When I do watch the NBA, I will root for them. And they are my favorite basketball team, but they haven't won shit. All right, like I know they've been to finals and they've been to East Finals, but they haven't won anything. The Bucks have won, and so the Bucks are more dangerous. And so for this reason, I am bullish on Milwaukee at the moment as the most dangerous team in the East. Now, look, I'm not going to shake off Philly either. Philly's hanging around. They're 9-1 in their last 10. I'm looking at the standings. They've won 8 in a row and they've leapfrogged the Celtics. Celtics are 5-5. And I'm not going to scare people, but it's not just those two teams that are playing better than the Celtics right now. The Cavs and Knicks are both 7-3 in their last 10 too. And the Cavs are only 4.5 back to the Celtics. I say only 4.5, but when there's 12 games left and the Celtics haven't played particularly well, and they're only 5-5 in their last 10, including a stretch where I believe they lost 4 out of 5. It's fair to ask the question if this Celtics team is fading. Now, would it surprise me if they go on a run and find their way to the tournament? So, excuse me, not the tournament. No, not what I mean. The NBA title series, absolutely not. They're good enough. Don't get me wrong. But at the same time, you look at even last year and you're like, okay, they went and they played the Bucks without Milton, and they swept a Nets team that wasn't engaged, and then the Heat took them to Game 7. So I look at those 3 series. If you're a Celtics fan and from last year, and you say, "Hmm, now the Bucks are healthy, relatively speaking, that I'm aware of. I'm not going to pretend to be an expert on their entire roster." And if you're a Celtics fan, you've got the Sixers who are better this year, and they've rid themselves of some of their problems. And so it's safe to ask the question: is this Celtics team vulnerable? And I believe it. I believe they are. There's a question mark about the coach, right? There is. There's a question mark about belief in that locker room, in my opinion. And we'll have to wait and see how they're looking when they enter the postseason. Because if they're still sort of hanging around and like maybe competing for the if they drop to the 3, their road to the finals gets exponentially harder. Because there's a strong possibility if they're the 3 that they in the second round go play the Sixers. Or then perhaps go play the Bucks. It's a very strong possibility that that's the case. So just be wary of that if you're a Celtics fan. That it's starting to look a little hairy, and it's been looking that way for a couple weeks now. I think Jaylen Brown has played really good recently. I think Tatum at times has at the end of the game there's been some questionable situations, right? Like, a missed layup and things like that. But there are opportunities for the Celtics team still with what they've got as their core, the Jays, Smart and whatever, and Horford. Then on the periphery with guys like Grant Williams. We know what they can do. Um, it's just, a matter of, can they take that next step compared to last year, with the additions they made in the offseason, Brogdon, whatever. But also with how better the Eastern Conference road is is looking for the other teams, right? The other teams are in a better position than they were last year, and the Celtics are going to have a harder time getting to the finals, no question about it. Which is weird to say because they got pushed by the Heat last year. They got pushed by um, the Bucks, and the Bucks didn't have one of their best players, and they really took advantage of a Nets team that didn't care. The road to the NBA Finals through the East for the Celtics, it's going to have some more adversity. So I just hope that they're able to rally again and have a good spring. All right. You know what? Another thing that you can do to have a good spring is subscribing to this podcast. That's going to do it for this episode. But if you haven't subscribed already, I would do so as soon as my voice is done talking. Or since your phone is a microcomputer that has more power than what we use to land the guys on the moon, I would go do that. Maybe even right now while you're listening to me talk. That would be great. You can do that wherever you get your podcasts, whether that's on Spotify, Apple, Google, Stitcher, Safari, Internet Explorer, anywhere. Go do that. Also, if you're watching on YouTube, drop below. Subscribe to us there. We'd love to get you a part of the program. You can also follow us on socials at Home Field Pod. Great to have you join the family over there. But until next time, we'll be back next week. My name is Will Highland, and you've been listening to Home Field Advantage.